Suddenly, 3 bulldozers roared through my front fence, tearing it apart like paper. Dust exploded into the air. I stood frozen, gripping my coffee, as construction workers in neon vests swarmed my field. One of them pointed right at me and yelled, "Hey, you're trespassing!" That's when I realized they actually thought this was their land, but it wasn't. It was mine. All of it. Every square inch. And they had already built 120 homes right in the middle of it. My hands shook, not from fear, but from rage. Because what they didn't know was that this chaos, this invasion, it was part of my plan. A plan I started 5 years ago. A plan that would leave their entire HOA begging me for mercy. They never even saw me coming. It was the quiet guy in flannel who sold tomatoes on weekends, they thought. Didn't own a suit. They thought I didn't read legal documents. But I had spent years in silence, watching, studying, and preparing. When the HOA rezoned the adjacent lot and expanded their plans, I knew they'd overlook something. And they did something critical. They failed to notice that one of the deeds they skipped in their rush to break ground was mine. A thin, triangular strip of land they assumed was county-owned. They never even contacted me. No letter, no visit, nothing. They just built right over it, not realizing that my deed stretched out like a blade, slicing right through the center of their entire master-planned community. I didn't stop them. I watched the roads get paved, streetlights installed, and families move in. I let them think they'd won. I let them decorate their porches and plan HOA barbecues. For 2 years, I said nothing. Then one morning, I walked into the county records office with a folder, dropped it on the clerk's desk, and said 8 words that changed everything. I'm here to enforce a property boundary. What followed was a legal avalanche that would make national headlines. By the time the HOA president learned what hit them, it was already too late. They had built 120 homes, townhouses, duplexes, a park, even a pool across land that I owned on paper, and had legally protected with something most people never think about, a hostile easement trap. Not just any easement, conditional. One buried deep in the deed, stating that any unapproved permanent structure built on my land would forfeit the builder's claim to it. Irrevocably. No compensation. No exceptions. And now, those families, those homes, they were sitting on my land like dominoes lined up for one final push. The HOA called an emergency meeting. They tried to scare me off with lawyers. One even said, "You won't win." You look like a monster, but they didn't know me. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing this because 5 years ago, they bulldozed my grandmother's grave by accident while developing Phase 1, and when I complained. They fined me for having a broken mailbox. They started this war. I just made sure I'd finish it. They tried silence first. For 3 weeks after I filed the enforcement claim, no one from the HOA responded. No calls. No letters. Not even a knock on my door. I figured they were regrouping, trying to figure out who I was and what kind of threat I posed. But they underestimated me again. What they didn't know was that I'd already retained a land rights attorney. The kind who didn't wear ties, but knew every inch of rural property law like scripture. He read my deed, then leaned back and whistled. They built on a war zone, he said. The first letter came a week later, slipped under my gate like a coward's apology. It was from the HOA's legal team requesting a friendly discussion to clarify misunderstandings regarding boundary errors. Misunderstandings. They poured concrete on my ancestors' land and planted maple trees over it. I didn't reply. The second letter came with a more aggressive tone. We are prepared to pursue a mutual resolution to avoid unnecessary litigation. Still, I said nothing. Every minute they delayed was one step deeper into the trap. I finally answered on a Friday morning when I knew their board would be in session. I emailed their president, Margot Bell, a woman known for issuing $200 fines over lawn height, and attached a full map overlay. My land parcel in red there. Construction, clearly overlapping it, in yellow. Now the subject line said only, "You built without asking." No threats, No demands, just the facts. They called within 40 minutes. She tried to sound calm, but I could hear the tension under her voice. "We believe this can be worked out without drama," she said. I told her I don't do drama. I do property law. Within 48 hours, they had summoned a real estate mediator. The man arrived in a Mercedes, smiled too much, and kept calling me Mr. Jeffers. My name isn't Jeffers. That's how little they cared. He offered me a settlement. $60,000 for a narrow strip of land that couldn't possibly matter much. I laughed. That strip of land runs underneath their only road in and out. Block it, and 120 homes become a dead end. He upped the offer to $100,000. I refused. It's not because I wanted more money, but because they hadn't earned the right to walk. Away clean, they tried digging, not with shovels, with records. Someone on their board contacted the county to challenge my deed, claimed it was forged or misfiled. But I'd registered it twice, and each time had it verified through a title company. It was ironclad. That's when they switched to public pressure. I woke up one morning to find a group of homeowners protesting. At the edge of my driveway, signs reading, "Let us stay, don't punish us," filled the air. I felt bad for about 10 minutes. Then I remembered how this HOA let a backhoe crush my grandmother's stone angel and left the pieces. In a ditch, local media picked it up next. "Man traps HOA with legal loophole," one headline read. They twisted it like I was a villain, but I wasn't hiding. I gave an interview. "I didn't trap anyone," I told the reporter. "I just waited while they ignored every warning." Signed, she asked me what I wanted. I said, "Accountability, not money, not fame. Just the chance to show them that farmers read deeds too." Pressure grew. People started blaming the HOA board. Homeowners demanded to know how they could build 120 homes without confirming the land title. Some board members resigned. Others started shifting blame to the developer, a company called Lockstone Equity Partners. That's when it got interesting, because they hadn't done a clean title search either. When they expanded their master plan, they used a bulk overlay based on an outdated county map. They assumed my land had been absorbed in the 90s. It hadn't, because I never sold. Now I had two enemies, the HOA and Lockstone. The HOA wanted peace. Lockstone wanted silence. I wanted neither. My lawyer filed a notice of encroachment, triggering an automatic review by the county development office that sent a shockwave. Because now any home overlapping my land would be flagged for unresolved ownership, which means no resales, no refinancing. Basically, financial purgatory. Some homeowners started to panic. One man, a father of 3, showed up at my door shaking. He begged me not to destroy his home, said he bought it fair and square. I believed him, but I told him the truth. "You're not my enemy. Your board is." He walked away in tears. That night, I barely slept. It wasn't personal against the families. It was personal against the machine that steamrolled my life 5 years ago. Never once said sorry. Lockstone's lawyers came next. Thick suits, briefcases, and fake smiles. They offered me $400,000 to go away quietly, I told them. No amount could buy back my grandmother's grave. They tried threats. Said I'd be tied up in court for years. I handed them copies of the conditional easement trap I filed 6 months before they broke ground. It specifically states that failure to obtain written permission for construction constitutes voluntary forfeiture of land use. Their lawyer read it twice, then asked for water. The county weighed in a week later. They issued a temporary development freeze on Phase 3 of Lockstone's project pending investigation. That cost them millions in projected sales. Homeowners started organizing, not against me, but against their own HOA. They demanded records, board minutes, everything. When it came out that Margot Bell had ignored 2 surveyor warnings about unconfirmed property lines, the community exploded. She resigned the next morning. Her house went up for sale the same week and sat empty. No buyers. Now I had the upper hand, not just legally, but publicly. People saw through the lie. I wasn't trying to ruin lives. I was trying to restore mine. I had the receipts to prove it. The final blow came when the court reviewed my claim and declared the structures overlapping my land as unauthorized encroachments under privately retained property. Translation: I now had the right to either demand their removal or charge rent. I chose the second option. Why? Because forcing families to bulldoze their homes wouldn't bring peace. But making the HOA pay rent every month for their mistake? That would remind them forever who they ignored. We calculated the usage: road access, utility easements, foundation overlaps. Monthly total, $19,500. Court-backed, non-negotiable. They had no choice. Today, they cut the first check. I didn't smile. I just nodded, took it, and walked back toward the farmhouse they once called an eyesore. But they know better now. I wasn't a fool in flannel. I was the guy who watched, waited, and struck when it mattered. And if they ever forget, I've got the land, and the law. On my side, the HOA didn't want the word rent on the record. They begged the court to rephrase it as a cooperative usage fee. But the judge rejected it. Let's call it what it is, he said. This man owns the land. You owe him rent. That one sentence echoed through every board member's ears like a warning bell. And it wasn't just embarrassing, it was precedent-setting. Now every HOA in the county was watching, terrified they'd made similar mistakes. It became a case. Study overnight. Lawyers started calling me, asking for interviews. I declined all of them. One by one, the homeowners began to adjust. Some were bitter, others just relieved that I didn't force demolition. A few even brought over pies, awkwardly trying to make peace. I accepted them politely, but I never forgot. Who let it happen? Some families moved out, their property sold for less than expected. Buyers demanded full disclosure, and when they read about the land situation, they used it to drive prices down. The HOA lost millions in valuation. My land, meanwhile, became more valuable than ever. Irony has a sharp sense of humor. But Lockstone wasn't done yet. They filed an appeal, claimed I had no right to profit off their unintended encroachment. Their wording made me laugh. Unintended. I had emails, maps, surveys, all ignored. My attorney filed a motion to unseal the developer's internal communications. That's when we found gold. One email from a site manager to the board saying, "We can probably get away with it, looks like abandoned farmland," that email. Killed their case. Ow. The judge threw out the appeal within a week. Game over. With the legal battle won, I turned my attention back to the land itself. Parts of it had been torn up, flattened, paved over. My old barn was now a neighborhood dog park. I didn't want to live in the past, but I also wasn't going to erase it. I sectioned off a half-acre at the edge of the property where my grandmother's grave used to be. With help from a few local veterans, friends of hers, we rebuilt the memorial. This time with stone, steel, and cameras. No one would bulldoze. Her legacy again. As for the rest of the land, I made a choice that stunned everyone. I leased part of it back to the HOA, under strict contract, triple market rate. They needed the road. They needed the sewer path. They needed me. And I wanted them to feel that need every single month. Some called it petty. I called it justice. They wanted to control everything until they found out who the real owner was. Then came the news segment. National network picked up the story. They sent a crew to my farm. The reporter asked if I felt like David fighting Goliath. I smiled and said David had a sling. I had paperwork. The clip went viral. Suddenly, my mailbox overflowed with letters from people who'd been steamrolled by HOAs. Developers, even crooked zoning boards. My story became a symbol, not of revenge, but of patience, planning, and pushing back when no one expects it. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. Lockstone went quiet for a while, then quietly pulled out of several rural projects. The HOA kept changing leadership. No one wanted to hold the steering wheel of a sinking ship. But the community started evolving, without Margot's iron-fisted rules. People painted their houses different colors, built porch swings, even hosted block parties without permits. It was almost ... human. Like they remembered what living in a neighborhood was actually about. Months passed, took a deep breath for the first time in years, planted tomatoes again, fixed the roof, repaired the old windmill. My lawyer joked that I should write a book. Maybe I will, but not yet, because there's still one thing left. A clause buried deep in the rental agreement that no one's noticed yet. It's as if any of their homes are ever remodeled, extended, or rebuilt. The lease is void, and I can revoke access to the property permanently. I didn't write it out of malice. I wrote it because I know them. The minute they forget, they'll try again, and I'll be ready. Every morning now, I walk past their paved road and into my own field, coffee in hand. Sometimes I see kids riding bikes, playing near the edge. They wave. I wave back. They don't know the history yet. Day they'll hear it, maybe not. What matters is the lesson. Land isn't just dirt. It's memory. It's sacrifice. It's ownership. And if you take it lightly, it will rise up and bite you when you least expect it. That's what the HOA never understood. They thought they could build over people, over stories, over legacy. But they forgot the oldest rule in the book. Read. The fine print. I didn't have money. I didn't have power. I just had the truth and the time to wait for it to matter. And when it did, they weren't ready. Sometimes I look back and wonder, what if I had said nothing? What if I'd signed the offer, taken the payout, disappeared? But then I remember the stone angel in the ditch, the broken mailbox fine, the letter calling me trespasser on my own land. I know I made the right choice. Some battles aren't about winning. They're about standing up no matter how long it takes. Now, the HOA sends me their rent by the 1st of every month, without fail. Deposit it, then walk outside and breathe. I still wear flannel. I still plant tomatoes. Still the quiet guy on the edge of town. But now, when I walk past those houses, they look at me differently. Not with fear, with respect. They know who I am now. I'm the landowner. I'm the guy who watched, waited, and struck. And I'm never going anywhere. The check came on time, like always. But this time, something was off. The envelope was different hand-delivered. Instead of mailed, with no return address, I opened it slowly. Inside was the payment. ... and a letter. ... Not from the HOA, not from Lockstone. From a private investment firm I'd never heard of, Monarch Holdings. The letter was brief. We are interested in acquiring the lease rights to your property. Please contact us within 72 hours. No offer, no explanation, just a phone number. My gut tightened. This wasn't normal. This was someone digging under the surface. I did my research. Monarch Holdings wasn't new, but they were quiet to quiet. No flashy website. No real contact. Info, but they'd been buying up failed developments across the state. Failed subdivisions. Golf resorts that went under. Ghost town malls. And now, apparently, land under HOA roads. I called my lawyer immediately. He looked up their filings. Private capital, foreign backing, he said. They don't flip, they hold. And they only buy things with long-term leverage. I asked him what that meant. Said they think your land is more valuable than you do. I didn't respond to the letter. Instead, I waited. Monarch sent another message, this time more aggressive. Failure to respond will result in escalation. I had no idea what that meant, but I wasn't intimidated. I'd stood against worse. Still, something didn't sit right. Why would they want my lease rights, unless they planned to collapse the HOA from the inside? If they owned the lease, they'd own the pressure point. They could hike the rent, sue the board, force buyouts, maybe even shut off access altogether. It wasn't about land. It was about power. Meanwhile, the homeowners started hearing whispers. Someone from the HOA had leaked the Monarch letter. Panic set in again. Rumors spread like wildfire. The road's getting shut down. The landowners selling us out. We're going to lose everything. I held a town meeting, my first ever. I showed up in jeans and boots, stood in the rec center with a fold-out chair and told them the truth. I'm not selling to anyone, I said. But someone out there wants to turn your neighborhood into leverage. And I'm not playing their game. That calmed some of them. But others didn't trust me. One woman stood up and shouted, "How do we know you're not just waiting for the highest bidder?" I looked her in the eyes and said, "You don't. You just have to look at what I've done so far." It quieted the room, because even the loudest critics had to admit it played fair. I hadn't evicted a single family. I hadn't torn down a single home. I could have. I didn't, and that mattered. But Monarch didn't back down. They escalated. This time, they didn't go through me. They bought a minority share in Lockstone. Equity partners. Quiet acquisition, buried in legal paperwork. But my lawyer caught it. "They're coming through the side door," he said. "They own part of Lockstone, and Lockstone sues the HOA for lost value. You can get a seat." At the negotiation table, suddenly this wasn't just a land dispute. It was a chessboard. They were 3 moves ahead. I had to act fast. So I filed a conditional freeze on the liaison emergency clause in our agreement that prevents any third-party transfer without mutual consent. The court granted it for 90 days. That bought us time, but Monarch had resources and patience. They wouldn't stop. And worse, I was starting to feel the weight. I didn't want to live in courtrooms. Didn't want to spend my days reading legal briefs and zoning maps. I just wanted my land back. But now, my land had become the key to someone else's kingdom. That's when I got the call from a man named Ellis Kane. He said he represented a group of concerned residents. I asked which ones. He didn't say, just that he wanted to meet privately. I agreed, cautiously. We met at a diner on the edge of town. He wore no tie, no watch, just a faded coat and steady eyes. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos, documents, recordings, proof that the HOA board had been hiding funds for years, legally rerouting maintenance budgets into off-the-book accounts. "You want a clean house," he said. "We need your help." I looked through the file. It was real embezzlement, false inspections, payoffs to local contractors. No wonder the roads were cracking, the lights flickering. I asked him why me. He said, "Because if you turn on us, this whole neighborhood collapses. But if you stand with us, we fix it. Together." I didn't answer right away, but I took the file home, spent the night going through every page. By morning, I made a choice. If this place was going to change, it had to start from the ground up. And I owned the ground. The next week, we made it official. I signed a community trust agreement, one that gave residents partial oversight of the lease as long as they voted to dissolve the corrupt HOA. It passed. Barely, but it passed. Within days, the old board was out. A new one formed half residents, half external auditors. They published every record online, held open meetings, invited me to every single one. I didn't go at first, but one night I showed up. Sat in the back. Watched them argue over garden fencing and mailbox styles. And for the first time, it didn't feel like war. It felt like healing. Monarch noticed. They sent another letter, this time with a number $2.1 million. Final offer, it said. Payable. In full, within 48 hours. I read it 3 times, then set it on fire. Not because I didn't need the money, but because some things aren't for sale. And because I knew that once they were desperate, they'd get sloppy. My lawyer agreed. "Let them push," he said. "They're not used to resistance. They're used to buying silence." He was right. Monarch started making noise. Filed a countersuit against the new HOA, claiming involuntary lease fraud. It was nonsense, but it slowed everything down. Residents grew anxious again. Some blamed me. Others stood by me. But the tension returned, thicker than ever. One night, someone threw a brick through my window. No note, just silence. I didn't call the cops. I just replaced the glass, because deep down, I knew this fight wasn't over. But neither was I the next day. I got a knock at the door. It was Ellis Kane again, this time looking less calm. He told me Monarch had contacted several homeowners directly, offered them private cash deals if they'd vote to dissolve the lease agreement. It was a long shot, legally gray, but it could. So chaos. Divide us from within. I told Ellis we had to get ahead of it. He agreed. That night, We held another meeting, this time packed to the walls. Took the mic and said something I never thought I would. I need your help. That changed everything. People leaned in. Some nodded. Some still frowned. But it was honest. No threats, no legalese. If we don't stand together, they'll tear this place apart. Not because they want to live here, but because they want to own what you walk on. I'm not selling, and I'm not scared. But I can't fight alone anymore. For the first time, the room clapped. Not wildly, but sincerely. It was something. A crack in the armor of doubt. Still, Monarch moved fast. They filed a motion to force arbitration, claimed the land lease, was creating an economically unviable environment. The judge scheduled a hearing within 30 days. We had 1 month to prepare. I spent every day working with Ellis, my lawyer, and a forensic accountant who volunteered after seeing the story online. She found more hidden shell contracts, staged maintenance reports, and even emails suggesting Lockstone faked inspection. Reports for insurance purposes, it was a mess. A ticking bomb, and Monarch had lit the fuse. I brought it all to court. We didn't hold back. We submitted over 400 pages of evidence. When Monarch's lawyer stood up to respond, he barely said 5 words before the judge raised a hand. "Sit down," he said. "This court sees exactly what's happening." Motion denied. But I knew better. They weren't finished. They were just changing tactics. 2 weeks later, someone tried to set fire to the old barn. It failed. Security cameras caught them. Teenagers paid cash by someone they wouldn't name. Police got involved. Quietly. No arrests. But I understood. The message. Monarch couldn't win in court, so they wanted to shake me outside it. That night, I stood in front of the scorched barn and made a promise out loud. You'll run out of money before I run out of ground. Then came the unexpected. Turn Ellis showed up at my porch with 2 people, a married couple, young, nervous. They said they used to work for Monarch, low-level data contractors. They'd seen something, files that showed Monarch wasn't just after my land. They were building a legal playbook to do this all over the country, by weak HOAs, exploit loopholes, collapse communities, and rebuild them as privatized zones with permanent land control. They called it soft seizure, and I had been the test run that changed everything. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was the front line of something bigger. I met with a state senator who had been following the case. She was furious, promised to introduce legislation banning corporate subversion of community easements. Maybe she would. Maybe she wouldn't. But now people were paying attention. Monarch went dark. Their social media vanished. Their public address changed. It had been exposed, and they hated that more than losing money. But even with them fading, something else had changed. I started getting letters again. Not threats, gratitude. From strangers. Your fight gave me hope. We're dealing with the same thing in Arizona. How did you hold on so long? I wrote back when I could, told them the truth. I didn't hold on. I just never let go. The neighborhood kept evolving. With the HOA dead, people finally built what they wanted. Solar panels, tool sheds, flower beds that spilled into the street, and no one fined them. It wasn't chaos, it was freedom. Ellis helped form a new cooperative board, voluntary, transparent, no fees. Just neighbors helping neighbors. I joined quietly as an advisor. They asked me to speak at the first annual block party. I kept it short. You can't fix everything, I said, but you can stop it from getting worse. That's a good start. Then one day I found something in the field. A small wooden stake, bright orange, stuck deep in the ground. Surveyor's paint near it. No one admitted to placing it. But I knew what it meant. Someone was testing the fence line. Looking for cracks. Maybe Monarch. Maybe someone else. I didn't panic. I walked back to the barn, pulled out the same old file I used years ago, the one with the maps, deeds, records. Then I sharpened the line markers again. If they wanted to try me, they'd get the same fight. Every time, that night, I sat on my porch with a mug of coffee, looking out at what used to be a battlefield. Now, it was calm. Kids on bikes. Dogs. off-leash, people laughing. I didn't win because I had power. I won because I refused to move. Because I remembered what my grandfather told me when I was a boy. Land doesn't leave, people do. I wasn't leaving. I still get calls. Book agents, podcast producers, TV networks. I say no to most of them. Because this wasn't a story for entertainment. It was a warning, a blueprint, and a reminder. Not everything that gets built belongs. Some things are planted. Some things are earned. And some things, you just defend until everyone else remembers what it's worth. So if you ever see a bright orange stake in your yard, don't ignore it. Ask questions. Cull the deed. Call a friend. Because by the time they pour concrete, it's already too late. And if they say it's just business, remember that business has boundaries. And some of them are drawn in dirt, sweat, and blood. That's what they didn't understand. That's why they lost. Because they came with paperwork. And I came. With purpose. I didn't win just for me. I won for every quiet person who was told they don't matter. For every letter ignored. For every mailbox fine. For every name erased from a land record like it was meaningless. We matter. And the land remembers us always. It started with one stake, then 3 more. Bright orange spaced out exactly 50 feet apart, forming a perfect line across the western boundary of my land. Whoever was doing this wasn't hiding. They were testing me. I didn't pull them up. Not right away. I flagged them, photographed them, then checked my old records. That section hadn't been touched in decades. No sale, no right-of-way, no legal filing. But someone wanted it, and they wanted it bad. This wasn't just a neighbor's fence mistake. This was a probe, and I knew from experience probes meant pressure. 3 nights later, the drone showed up. I heard the buzzing before I saw it. A black quadcopter hovering just 20 feet above my barn roof. No lights, no visible markings. I stepped outside with a flashlight and shined it straight into the lens. It didn't flinch. It just hovered. Watching, I waved. It zipped up and away silent. Surgical. I checked for any signs of a dropped sensor. Nothing. But that confirmed what I already suspected. Monarch or someone just like them was back. Only this time, they weren't making offers. They were scouting weaknesses. I filed a trespass notice and sent copies to the sheriff's zoning office and FAA. Most shrugged it off. Drones fly all the time, one clerk told me. I asked him if drones usually scan barn roofs at 3 a.m. He didn't answer. So I doubled security, installed motion lights, sensor cameras, even infrared flood beams. My land looked like a military checkpoint by the next day. Neighbors thought I was going paranoid. Maybe I was. But I'd lived through the last war. I knew what came next. And it was never good. By the following week, 5 different homeowners had received anonymous letters. Each claimed their home sat within a contested easement corridor and may be subject to title review. All unsigned. All mailed from out of state. Began again. Ellis brought me copies. I read every word. These weren't legal threats. They were psychological warfare. Designed to break confidence, sow fear, drive division. Just like Monarch's last campaign. But this time, we had experience. This time, people called me first instead of a lawyer. That changed everything. We held another meeting, no agenda, no HOA, just neighbors in a repurposed barn with folding chairs and thermoses of coffee. I brought maps. Real ones. Printed in ink. Stamped by the county registrar. I showed them the lines. This is what we own. This is what I own. And this, I pointed to the new orange stakes. Is someone else trying to erase both? You could feel the tension in the room. But for once, no one shouted. They just nodded. Silent understanding. Tired of being pawns. Ready to dig in. 2 days later, I spotted the survey crew. 2 trucks, no logos, parked near the old creek bed that split my western slope. They weren't county. They weren't power company. Just guys in boots with clipboards and laser scopes. I approached. Calm. You're on private property. I said. One of them barely looked at me. Public drainage review, he said. Just collecting water flow data. I asked who hired them. Can't say, he replied. That told me everything I needed to know. They packed up fast. But they left behind a plastic marker buried in the brush. I bagged it. That night, Ellis and I reviewed the footage. My cameras had picked up their truck plates. We traced the rental to a shell firm out of Atlanta. Same address Monarch had used once before. New name, new faces, same shadow. But now, we had receipts. We filed a cease and desist, publicized it through a local paper. That move wasn't legal, it was psychological. A warning flare. We see you, and just like last time, they backed off. For now, but things got weirder. A reel-to-reel local, not corporate, called me about a potential buyer. He's not asking for a price. He wants to lease long-term. No build-out, just access. I asked what kind of access. Said he's looking for privacy, doesn't want to be seen. That was enough. I declined, but the idea stuck with me. Of person leases land not to build, but to hide. Something wasn't adding up, and I had the creeping sense that the stakes weren't about housing anymore. They were about control, territory, and secrecy. Ellis agreed. We drove out to the far end of the property, where the stakes had first appeared. Something was wrong. The brush was cut clean, deliberate, like someone had cleared a path. We followed it. About 200 yards in, we found it. A buried cable recently installed, still soft in the earth. Fiber optic, unmarked, running east-west. No permit, no utility. Record, I called the county. They had no knowledge. I called the state, same answer. Someone had run hidden infrastructure through my land. Now this was bigger than easements or HOAs. This was covert, strategic. Ellis said what I didn't want to. They're building something underground that changed the game. We hired a private excavation firm. Quiet, trusted. They scanned the entire perimeter. What they found chilled me. Series of conduit tunnels, narrow deep, and running parallel to the development line. Someone had already spent tens of thousands digging beneath us. Not for homes, for data, for transmission, maybe for surveillance. We didn't know yet, but we were officially past real estate. I brought the evidence to the state senatorhood. Helped us before? She looked horrified. Said this crossed into national security. Promised to escalate it. Within days, federal agents arrived. Unmarked cars, clean suits, asked a lot of questions, took even more pictures. Gave him everything. And for once I saw something in their eyes I hadn't seen before. Respect. They knew I hadn't cried wolf. I'd caught something real. They didn't want it public. But I made one thing clear. If this goes quiet again, they'll come. Back louder. One of the agents nodded. Noted. That was all. They disappeared the next day. No updates, no statements, but I knew they were watching. And for now, that was enough. Meanwhile, the neighborhood changed again. People reinforced their fences, bought dogs, installed lights. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. They understood now. Peace doesn't come from ignoring the fight. It comes from preparing for it. Together, that spirit held everything together like mortar. One night I found a note taped to my truck window, handwritten, no signature. They lost round 1. Round 2 is different. Stay sharp. I didn't sleep much that week, not because I was scared, but because I knew whoever wrote that was right.